Welcome to the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast, the show committed to helping you dismantle the destructive mindset programs keeping you stuck in the proverbial bunker of poor performance so you can get out of your own way and play to your potential. My name is Paul Salter. I'm a high-performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach with 16 years of experience helping thousands of individuals like you get unstuck. This podcast features a collection of solo episodes, conversations with scratch and plus handicap golfers, and master classes with top experts in the performance psychology space. The one goal? To help you make playing to your potential a habit. If there were ever a time to truly stop, slow down, and pay attention, that time is now. In today's episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast, I sit down with one of Europe's leading performance coaches and the founder of the Mind Caddie app, Karl Morris, to dive deep into why attention is the true currency of performance, both on and off the golf course. I have a hunch you're incredibly familiar with Karl Morris. If not, you absolutely should be. The Mind Caddie app is nothing short of phenomenal. The Mind Factor podcast, absolutely incredible. I was fortunate enough to be featured back in the month of July. But I want to make sure you truly understand just how experienced and insightful today's guest is. Again, Karl Morris is one of Europe's leading performance coaches with over 30 years of experience, helping golfers at every single level, from weekend players to multiple major champions, unlock their potential. Known for his practical, no-nonsense approach, Karl specializes in mental game strategies that are easy to apply under pressure. He has worked with six major winners, dozens of European Tour and PGA Tour professionals, and countless elite amateurs. If you're ready to really take your game and yourself to the next level, then the time to pay attention and start listening begins now. Please help me welcome Karl to the show. Karl, it's great to have you on the show, and I want to waste no time. So I'm curious. I've heard you say, I've seen you in writing talk about attention as the currency of performance. What does that mean?
It basically means, well, that in this world that we're in at the moment, where almost everything in the world is trying to distract us and make our ability to pay attention to just about anything next to impossible, with the emails that we get and the social media and the bombardment of messages and the amount of information that our brain is being exposed to these days in the modern world is just and we're not designed to soak all of that up. And then we come to play a good old-fashioned game like golf, where unfortunately, whether we like it or not, golf demands our attention, because this particular shot that you're about to play, you've never played this shot before. You're never going to play it again. It's literally a unique moment in time. The golf course is asking you a set of questions, and if you're not paying attention to those questions, you're going to miss something. So the long answer to a good question is that the ability to bring your attention to where it needs to be is a supreme skill, and it's a skill that, as I said earlier, it's getting harder and harder to do. But the rewards for being able to bring your attention to each individual shot, the rewards to bring your attention to what you want to in life, is not only going to improve your game, but it's going to improve your overall experience because of life in general. Because we basically, our happiness or otherwise is going to be determined by what we pay attention to.
Yeah. Can we use the word focus interchangeably with attention?
Yeah, I think you could use focus, you could use concentration. We've all probably remember those school teachers who said to us at some point, Paul, you need to concentrate on what you're doing, or Karl, focus on this exam. And I look back at those school days and nobody ever taught me how to do it. They told me to concentrate, they told me to focus, but they didn't give me any idea how to. And I think that's where things like hypnosis and meditation, things like these. These are wonderful avenues to explore, because ultimately, what is meditation? What is hypnosis? It's an ability to pay attention to something that you deem useful.
Yeah, I love that. And better than I do, there are no shortage of distractions, not only on the golf course itself, but in the mind when we're standing over that ball. We have swing thoughts, we have unconscious fears, limiting beliefs, behaviors that are just creating that mental interference. So the question then becomes, what can we begin to do to train our ability to focus and pay attention?
Yeah. I think, first of all, a big one for me, which I've kind of evolved in my coaching over the last number of years, is to be okay and to understand we're never going to control our thoughts, in the sense that, if anybody listening knows what they're going to think next, that they're well in front of me, because this thing that I've got residing between my ears throws up the most irrelevant rubbish most of the time. But as something I heard a number of years ago, you don't have to believe what you think, and to understand that your brain will constantly produce thoughts, because the brain pumps out thoughts like the heart pumps blood. Yeah. But the difference is, there's a difference between having thoughts and deliberate thinking. And deliberate thinking is then bringing your attention to where you want it to be. Now, for me, the nuclear weapon for a golfer in the battle for attention is to understand the power of good questions. Because it must have been 25 years ago. I remember sitting in a Tony Robbins seminar 3 days, and some of it was useful, some of it wasn't. But I look back and I heard probably the most important thing that I've ever heard from an educational perspective in the last 25 years. When Tony said, he said that the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your questions. And I had just no idea then, naively, I had no idea how important that statement was, but I do now. Because what I began to understand later was that questions focus our attention. For anybody listening now, if I said to if I said, what can you hear in the background? Momentarily, we'd all leave this podcast and we'd start to pay attention to what I can hear in the background. So questions, the ability to ask the right questions on a golf course, is such a supreme asset to get better at paying attention. So it might sound the simplest thing in the world, but anybody listening now could imagine, if you're on the golf course that you know well, you're on the first tee, you can see what you can see to the left, you can see what you can see to the right. You may have some negative thoughts from the past about hooking it out of bounds or blocking it to the right or whatever. But if I then said, okay, Paul, what does a good shot look like here? And that question, our brain is a question answering machine. And just by, what does a good shot look like? Well, a good shot looks like a little draw off that right-hand trap, or it looks like a little fade down the left-hand side, or I can see it turning over towards that trick or whatever. It's amazing, even with relatively inexperienced golfers, when you get them to understand the power of the question, or that question by definition will bring their attention to that particular unique shot. And then images are formed of what the shape of the shot may be and the target and things like that. And yes, I know for anybody listening, you say, well, I've got to be able to have a swing that can match up with that. Yes, we need to understand impact conditions and what we need to do to hit certain shots. But your ability to pay attention to this shot in this particular moment can be massively assisted by the utilizing good questions.
I love that, because before you even brought up Tony Robbins, my mind went to that exact quote. So now I already know we're best friends because that's where you went. Like, I love that.
Right.
It's the way you explain that is so powerful. So for you listening, I hope you will go back and re-listen to those last 5 minutes. And what I really found interesting about what you shared, especially with the golf specific analogy, what shot do I need to hit here? Your subconscious is always listening. So if you're continuing to allow your mind to drift to that snap hook OB, the blocked right shot pattern you found yourself in on this particular hole, your subconscious is going to work with you to make that become your reality once again. And here you're saying the way to interrupt that is by asking a better question. So good. Now I'm curious, is there a framework or a recommended approach to how you actually articulate that question?
I think, when you look at the top players in the world, who obviously they have caddies, I think great caddies provide that service in the sense that, a good caddy, I think these days, the information that caddies provided 30 years ago when we used to have to go out on the golf course with measuring wheels and things like that. We used to have to pace things off. And, for younger viewers listening to this, I think, what the hell is this old guy talking about? There's no real science in distance anymore and things like that and conditions. We've got, lasers that are unbelievably accurate. But what a great caddy can do is ask a question, so then the player will verbalize it to them. Now, for an individual, most of us are not going to have caddies. For an individual, you can ask that question inside of your head. Now, when you ask that question, what does a good shot look like? For some people, they will get a strong visual image. For other people, to verbalize, I'll get some players to test this out and go on the course, ask the question, and just, see what images form as a result of the question. But for some people, that may be not that strong. So ask them to then verbalize the answer to that question. What does a good shot look like here? It looks like that hard draw from right to left. And it's amazing. Sometimes with some players, when you verbalize the answer, the visual image then gets stronger. Yes. Basically, all I'm trying to get people to understand, Paul, is that our mind-body system is going to respond to the map that we create of the shot. If the map is clear of the shot that we're trying to play, we then set off a wonderful cascade whereby mind and body can interact to produce that shot. It's even relatively high handicap players will be able to relate back to certain times on the course, maybe when they've been in trouble and they've maybe hit the ball in the trees and they have to bend the ball around the trees to get it back in play. And they produce some, amazing shots in those situations. That's because the golf course has provided such a clear map for what you're trying to get the golf ball to do. Now, what we need to do is provide that clear map from the first tee to the 18th hole, whether it's an individual chip, a putt, a drive. The clearer the map of what we're trying to do with the golf ball, the more then the genius of the body can start to interact with that map to produce the movement. So a follow-up question from what does a good shot look like could well be, okay, how does that feel? So then you've seen the shot, you've visualized the shot, you've verbalized the shot. How does it feel? Then that puts you directly tuning in kinesthetically with what you maybe need to do with the golf club to produce that shot. So here's where a great alliance would be formed with a technical coach, whereby the technical coach is, to me, coaches of the future won't be swing coaches, they'll be shot coaches. Because as far as I'm aware, when you get to the end of a round of golf, they don't ask you how many swings you've made. They ask you how many shots you've hit. And I think if the coach isn't guiding a player more towards having an armory of shots when they go on the golf course, and it's very much about what a golf swing looks like, and we've got to hit certain positions because that's what you're supposed to do. I know all of that has some part to play, but ultimately, if you focus a little bit more on developing shots as a golfer, as opposed to endlessly trying to fix your swing, I think we're now moving in a better direction.
Really well said. Yeah, I'm just chewing on that. I really like that approach. I agree with that. Now I'm curious. I almost hear the quality of the questions you ask begins to serve as, the bumpers in bowling. This tunnel vision is slowly being formed. We're focusing our attention and energy on the right topic, the right question. Yet for many of us, and maybe I'm speaking on behalf of myself, of course, there's still the struggle to stay focused on that question, navigating the mental interference that is inevitably present. How can we continue to train ourselves to stay in that process?
I think this is a great opportunity for everybody listening because, the rules of the game or the rules of golf suggest that you're trying to score as low as possible. Everybody's going out there, you're trying to shoot as low as possible relative to par. So that score is always going to be there, the score as I call it. the purpose of the round of golf is for you to decide. So you could go out and play.
Cool.
You could play a round of golf and decide that your purpose today is that you're going to play a game within the game. So, for instance, that could be something as simple as your goal today is to ask a good question on every shot. So then you go out, and at the end of the first hole, if you've asked a good question on every shot, regardless of the outcome, you would actually give yourself a tick on the scorecard. On the first hole, you award yourself a tick. You honoured your commitment. And the goal then is 18 ticks. Now, nobody's going to get 18 ticks because there's all kinds of distractions going to take place and stuff's going to happen. You're going to three-putt, play's going to be slow, all that kind of stuff. But if there's an objective way of measuring your mental game, you're much more likely to stay on track with it then. Now, this is the beauty of most people who are into this kind of stuff are competitive. And if you go out there with the idea of asking a good question on every shot and you're going to mark it, and then after the first 5 holes, you've not got a single tick, all you've got is crosses, you're going to start to then pay attention because you're not going to want to see your mental game score as being 18 crosses at the end of the round. You want to get a tick. And then the beauty of it is, Paul, with this, then you can start to look at what is the correlation between my mental game score, the tick score, and the actual score. Is there some direct link with the two? Now, it's not always the case, but very often there's some interesting data that starts to emerge as a result of this.
Do you find this element of gamification it's powerful for many reasons, but do you find the fact that it brings in an element of novelty that helps further grasp our focus in a game we've otherwise, played probably thousands of times? That novelty is almost like it reinvigorates our energy to then be better direct and stay present throughout the round.
I think there's that, which is a huge point, but I think maybe even stronger than that is that when you do anything, that you're either in pursuit of something or you're trying to avoid something. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much a primeval driver. Now, I think what most golfers end up doing, they have what I call a subconsciously acceptable score. So let's say you're 10 handicap, your subconsciously acceptable score will probably be anything between 75 and 85, something like that. So you go out there on the golf course, and if you start to drop some shots, the very phrase, I drop some shots, then you start to get into protection mode because now you're trying to avoid poor shots.
Yep.
As opposed to the tick game is, right, I've got the first tick, let's get another one. So you go in pursuit of more ticks. Now, there's a very different physiological reaction in any activity to being in pursuit of something as opposed to being in avoidance of something.
Yeah.
When we're avoiding something, our brain perceives a threat. If there's a perceived threat, primevally, it's wired into us. We're either going to fight it, fly, run away, or freeze. None of those are very useful for golf. So, I think this is a huge subject. Does the golf course occur to you as an opportunity, or does it occur to you as a threat?
Yeah.
And inadvertently, no kid plays golf initially. The golf course doesn't occur to any kid as a threat. Every shot is an opportunity. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, as we supposedly get older and wiser, but ego kicks in and all that kind of stuff, the golf course begins to be a threat rather than opportunity. Scheffler is a perfect example, and I know it's very easy to pick on the best player in the world and somebody who's dominated the game. Not since Tiger has been somebody like that. Scheffler plays golf from a place where golf is constantly an opportunity. It's not a threat. The way his brain perceives the game called golf is pure opportunity, not threat.
Yeah. He hasn't lost that childhood-like curiosity, that sense of play that so many of us kind of have weeded out as we grow older and take on more responsibility.
Yeah. And he's also got a perspective on it that I don't know whether you or any of your listeners listen to the interview he gave just before the British Open, and it kind of like it threw a hand grenade into the press tent there, and he was kind of saying, if I win this thing this week, I'm going to be happy for a few minutes, but then life's going to carry on, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And he was to me, he perfectly verbalized that he's seen through the illusion that if you do something at golf, it's going to make you happy forevermore. And we know the reality of that. It's wonderful to win tournaments. It's great to aim at that. But the idea that it's going to make you happy for a long time is a myth. By the same definition, the idea it's going to make you miserable for a long time is a myth as well. We're far more resilient than we think. We can deal with some things worse than 3 putts or shooting 80 or whatever. But I think if we don't embrace that and we don't bring it out onto the table, if the golf course is occurring as a threat, then the movements that we make relative to that threat, no amount of good practice on the range, no amount of swing theory is actually going to protect you from that. The way the golf course occurs to you is one of the huge factors that we don't look anywhere near enough at.
Yeah, it's such a hidden gem. And again, for you listening, go back and listen to what Karl is sharing. So much wisdom here. You used a word that I really, really like, resiliency. How do you define resiliency? What's it mean to you?
I think resiliency is if we take it with golf, I think resiliency is a willingness to accept the multitude of outcomes that there could be on any given day. I think if I was going to say what is the ultimate mental game skill, it would be the skill of acceptance. Acceptance creates or leads to resiliency. So people get very confused with what acceptance is. Acceptance isn't being happy if you're a bad shot. It isn't being happy when you 3-putt. It's a willingness to deal with the reality of the game. And the reality of the game, Paul, is, for you, me, everybody, the rest of our life, every round of golf is going to contain 3 types of golf shot. There's going to be what I call ones. Now, ones are good shots. 2s are good enough. And 3s are poor shots. Now, even if you go and shoot 59, you'll still hit a couple of 3s in there, because I've spoken to guys who've done that very thing, and they've actually even said they didn't hit it that great. They hit it well, but not outstanding, believe it or not, when you've shot ridiculously low numbers like that. Now, when we're willing to accept that every round will contain those variety of good shots, good enough, and poor, an acceptance is developed that gives you the resiliency to be able to deal with whatever the game throws at you. To me, being resilient is you've 3-putted the last green from 6 feet. You're mad as hell initially, but you have the resiliency to deal with it and then be ready to create the next one when you get onto the next tee.
I've never heard it phrased that way. I like that. I hear too. Or go ahead.
Go on, sorry.
I hear like there has to be an underlying deep level of trust. We could use trust, belief, or confidence in yourself too, because understanding we can do all we can to remain committed to executing our process. The outcome, if we can accept it, we understand and accept the outcome is not within our control. And if we get a quote, I use air quotes, unfavorable outcome that creates a new challenge, we trust and are confident in our ability to then go handle that next challenge. And we just keep going one by one by one.
Probably the most influential coach on my career. I mentioned Tony Robbins there, but there's a guy called Fred Shoemaker who, if you haven't had on your show, you must get him on there. I mean, Fred is a legendary coach in California. And it must be 30 years ago, Fred said to me, he said, and it's back to questions again, he said, the bravest thing that a golfer can ever do when they play golf is stay open to possible. And he explained to me then that when you hit the first tee shot, a question could be, is it possible this ball could find the fairway? Now, unless you decide otherwise by creating a story in your mind about the past, it is possible you could hit this fairway. Is it possible you could hold this next putt? Now, you may have missed everything today. You may be on the 14th green and you've had a dreadful day on the greens, but you've got an 8-foot putt. Is it possible you could hold that putt? Well, the answer is yes. Yeah. Is it possible you could carry it 350 over water into wind, Probably not. It's not possible isn't being a fantasist, but understanding the power of possible, and then having the bravery to stay open to possible instead of closing it down with stories. Stories such as "it's not my day," or "I'm useless," or "I can't play this game." Fill in the blanks of whatever your own personal sort of sob story is. Staying open to power, staying open to the possible, again, is a very resilient state of mind.
I love that. I hear elements of curiosity too, which, kind of used hand in hand. And that's something I've always been a big advocate for. If you can bring a lens of non-judgmental curiosity, both during and then after a round, it becomes a superpower, an accelerant to improve at a much faster pace, because it allows you to be open and accepting that there are areas of yourself and your game that need to be addressed. You can then bring your focus and attention to them because you see them clearly. And we know that's a recipe for accelerated progress.
Just as you said there, Paul, just the act of observation is really, really powerful. I've had some people, because we run these patterns unconsciously, don't we? It's subconsciously that, angry people don't really know how angry they truly are. People with really chronic self-talk don't really know what they're how bad that is. But I've had a number of players over the years who, and it seems like a non-intervention, but it's a powerful intervention. I'll just say, right, the next round that you play, I don't want you to try and change anything. All I want you to do is simply observe how you react to the shots that you hit. Just that's your only job today is observe your reactions. Now, the minute you put somebody in an observer state of mind, they're not in the story anymore. They're observing the story.
Yeah.
And so straight away, it's very rare that you get somebody to do that observation game, that they don't come up with some good insights, but they know, their subconscious mind knows the person they really want to be. They've just managed to mask that for a long time.
Yeah, because of fear, perceived consequences, the whole 9 yards. Now, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about some of these powerful intangibles that can be developed. There's focus, attention, concentration, the resiliency, acceptance. The question then becomes, we can talk about how good all of these traits and characteristics are. What does mental training actually begin to look like as you're working with a golfer? How do you then begin to take the prerequisite action to build and develop these skills?
I think, as I say, gamifying some of the changes that you maybe work on is powerful. I think the other thing that is really powerful is I don't know too many people who've been successful who at some level don't keep some kind of journal. I think journaling is very, very powerful. I divide the game up, Olive, when I'm working with somebody in terms of working on the mental side of the game, because it can be a minefield, as you know, can't it? It can be just this huge, huge subject. But I talk to players about what I call the 4 quadrants. So the 4 quadrants would be before golf, during golf, the in-between, and after. And, for anybody listening, if you look at those 4 areas, you could take those 4 areas. So what do you do before you play? What is actually happening when you hit the shots? A big area to explore is the in-between, is what happens in the 95% of time when you're not playing golf. And then how do you process the game afterwards? And within that framework, then, you could really look at, even asking a player, if you could see those 4 areas, where do you think you could make some improvement? 9 times out of 10, a player will say, I could be a lot better in that in-between time because I just beat the crap out of myself all the way around. And then you've got an entry point as a result of that framework. I think if we just say, right, I've got to work on my mental game, that's too big. It's a hell of a big subject, that, and how do we break it down? So, for instance, the in between time.
Let me clarify something real quick, Karl. Is that in between time, the 3 hours and 55 minutes of a round, you're not actively hitting a shot, or is it the other 20 hours of the day?
No, it would. So the before, during, in between, and after, Paul, would encapsulate a round of golf. In effect.
Perfect.
So the in between is the time on the course when you're not playing.
Perfect.
So, and for most people, that's the real low hanging fruit of opportunity, because most people's experience of the 95%, is they're inside the head running some variation of this, regretting the past and anticipating the future.
Yeah.
Now, again, just to quote a guy who NLP was based upon, or his work was based upon, a guy called Fritz Perls, who was a Gestalt therapist. I heard a phrase that he came out with so many years ago, and again, it was a powerful one for me. And he said that we need to stop thinking and come to our senses. And I heard that, and I thought, wow, that's an interesting phrase. And what's that all about? Well, when we're in our head thinking, as I said, we're generally in the past or in the future. We're not present to our experience. When we tune into our senses, by definition, if I tune into what I can see or what I can hear or what I can feel, or in other areas, what I can taste or what I can smell, by definition, we can only be tuned into our senses in the present.
Yeah.
So a real interesting area for me in the last 30 years has been with players is to explore, see, hear and feel in that in-between time. So I'll get players to play a game whereby we'll say, right, okay, today, 6 holes, mark it on your card, 6 holes, tune into what you can see in between shots. 6 holes, tune into what you can hear. 6 holes, what you can feel, the ground underneath your feet, etc. Make a game of it again. Every single person I've ever done with that has some kind of experience where there's a bit of a light bulb, where one of those 3 senses tends to hold their attention much better in between shots. I can think of a young German player who's a very, very good player, top amateur player, who was having real issues with dealing with poor shots. We got him doing this exercise. The see didn't do anything for him. The feel didn't really do anything for him. But he came back, he said, wow, he said, I played 6 holes just tuning into the sounds of the golf course. He said it was unbelievable how peaceful that was. And it was unbelievable how I was able to leave behind what had happened in the past and not get caught up in too much anticipation of the future. So that has been his development in the in-between time. I know it sounds corny and all the rest of it, but to tune into the sounds.
Yeah.
We're in a fantastic, beautiful place that if we're in our head for 5 hours, we miss all of that. If nothing else, by understanding what you do in the in-between time, you actually have a better experience of the game itself. It may lead to better scores, I don't know. My experience is it provides a great foundation to get the best out of your golf.
And I love your encouragement to explore a variety of senses, because it's easy just to think, okay, slow down. What do I see? I mean, for better or for worse, down here in Tampa, I have to be on my eyeball game because there could be a gator 10 feet around every corner. For my own safety, I tune in. But I too resonate with the sound. And being able to hear and experience the nothingness, the faint ripple of the water, the birds. So I love that you're encouraging, whether it's the sight, the sound, you bring in smell. I imagine you could get your sound or your taste involved too. If there's gum, there's mints or something. So just to the listener, really encouraging you to get curious, see what helps you to really lock into that present moment.
And this is where, for folks who don't have much time to play golf, which most people don't, this is where you could work on your mental game away from the golf course. So I'll get a lot of players, I'll say, have you got 10 minutes a day to go for a walk? Well, even the busiest executive in the world's usually got 10 minutes to go for a walk. Well, not only is that beneficial physically, obviously, to go for a walk, but I would then, it's something I do literally every day. I'll get up early and I go out, and the one that really resonates for me is feel. So if I tune into the feeling of my feet as I'm walking along, I set that as a mantra, and I put my attention on the feeling of my feet. And there's some days that I can stay there for a good period of time. Other days I notice my mind jumping off and thinking about what I need to do and what I should have done, all this kind of stuff. But just the simple act of going for a walk every day with some purpose in terms of your attention, coming back to the very thing that you said at the beginning, attention is the currency of performance. You can train your attention going for a walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm just pulling on my desk. I have a quote that I'm often coming back to is manage your focus, not your time. another way to say, put your intentionality into where you're spending your attention, because you'll find it's almost a trigger to get into that flow state if you're really mindful and present of where and how you're spending your focus, because everything else falls by the wayside. You're far more productive, present, and effective when you're focused on the right thing.
But we're happier.
Yeah, so much.
The brain is happier when your attention is absorbed in something. And whether we like it or not, the modern world, as I said earlier on, is doing everything to destroy that. There's a guy, Izzy Justice, who I've collaborated with him on a couple of programs, and he's done a lot of research in terms of brain activity, brain scans, and I think it was Daniel Amen, another neuroscientist who researched this, and they found that the average brain activity of folks in the Western world these days is similar to a schizophrenic in the 1950s, in the sense that our brain is just so overloaded with stuff in a way that it's not designed to be. You think even 20 years ago, before the advent of smartphones, and whether we like it or not, when we get these smartphones out and we're flicking around and going from one thing to another, and another 20-second video and another hit, and your brain is just receiving these short hits of dopamine, and then there's a crash and we need another hit. We need another hit. It's a deadly state of mind. There's a guy called Jonathan Haidt who's written extensively about this, about the decline in mental health as a result of the smartphone. Now, I'm not saying it's all about the smartphone. I'm not demonizing the smartphone. It's going to be with us, for the rest of our lives. But understanding what your smartphone is potentially doing to your brain, but then seeing golf as the most phenomenal antidote to this. This is where golf should sell itself. It's a fantastic antidote to the chaos that the world is raining in us if we choose to use it the right way.
So what I'm hearing is you shouldn't be on your phone in between every shot, obviously, but I'm sharing that for the listeners. Hey. And I know, speaking personally, if I open Instagram or I log into my email anytime before 5 p.m., I'm fucked, because I just want those dopamine hits the rest of the day. And I don't win every day. There are days where I'm on Instagram at 10 a.m. and I struggle to rein in my focus and attention spending the rest of the day. So I hear that on a personal level, just how powerful and addictive the smartphone, the way the social media platforms are designed, that we've got to take ownership and institute some level of structure and discipline to reclaim our focus.
The point on dopamine, and I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, Paul, the dopamine effect is so serious to understand that up until recently, to receive a hit of dopamine in the brain, it involves some effort. So some effort would be, you would have chopped some wood, you would have prepared a meal, you would have done a workout, you would have done something physical, and as a result of that effort, when you completed that task, there was a dopamine release as a result of completing a task that required some effort.
Sure.
That was then slow release dopamine that you would feel good for a long time after chopping the wood, doing the workout or whatever. We're getting a false version of that with quick hits on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, where there's no effort required. Yeah. We watch the latest kitten video, whatever the hell it is. We feel entertained. The dopamine shot hits our brain. Hit, crash, hit, crash all the time. And it is a serious thing to look at. It's not good for our life, but it's deadly for our golf.
Yeah. Did you accidentally just give us a little sneak preview of what we would find in your Instagram Reels kitten videos?
I must admit, and this is not a good thing to say, I am a complete Luddite where social media is concerned. My wife does all my social media stuff. I am not interested at all what somebody ate last night. I'm not really interested in what they're going to wear when they go out on a Friday night. I'm a very sad Luddite in that respect. But in a way, I'm happy in my blissful ignorance with a lot of it.
I love that for you, and more people should take that approach. I'm going to shift gears here because this is a topic Admittedly, it's been talked about length everywhere, but I think based on the direction of our conversation so far, it'd be really valuable to get your take. We're both well aware of the consistent incongruency golfers experience between their range game and who the hell shows up on the course.
Mm.
In your, immaculate experience, why do people struggle to translate their range game to the course? And what's the low-hanging fruit opportunity they have to start being able to mesh the two?
Yeah. I think fundamentally the biggest reason why we don't transfer is that there's such a mismatch in the two environments. I think if you look at the environment called range, where we've got a bunch of balls sat on a perfect lie to a wide open field, and then we go to the golf course, which is a dynamic changing environment with slopes and all the rest of it and wind conditions. And there's just a mismatch between the two environments. That said, there is a place for the range to work on technical skills. I think for me, I actually get players. This sounds a bit wacky, but it's such a big subject. We could do 3 podcasts on this thing alone, because I think that 2 things that you need to do from a golf perspective is you need to develop skills. So anybody who says that it's all in the mind is nonsense. You need to develop the ability to influence impact. You need impact physics. So you need to develop skills, but you then need to be able to access those skills. Now, those two requirements, I don't think, require different ways to actually practice and interact. So I actually get players to wear different hats. This sounds a bit crazy, but I'll get them to wear, for instance, when they're working on technique, when they're working on what the coach is getting them to do and drills and things like that, metaphorically, they would wear the white hat.
Yeah.
You pick your colour, whatever you want, and you stand in a certain location on the range. But then at some point, we then make the switch. We put the blue hat on. We go to a different part of the range. Now this is all about trying to access those skills and create games where we're simulating the real thing. So I have a 30 ball. You can do it however you want, but I'll have a 30 ball challenge where they'll go from training to actually playing, change the hat, and then they'll get 10 clubs out. 10 different clubs, and then you put blocks of 3 balls, 30 balls, and each of the 3 balls you've got to hit with 1 club, and you see how many functional shots that you can hit out of those 3 shots. Right. So you take your 7-iron out, and how many functional shots were in that first set of 3, then change to something else, and then you could actually put a score down at the end of it. So you gamify it, you create a consequence. But you change the club, you change the target. I mean, stuff people have heard, but by actually having a set of 30 balls where every shot is judged, every shot's going to be judged on the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that metaphoric shift of going from one colour hat to another one is quite powerful for the brain. It's like a spatial anchor in a way that you change in those locations.
I love that. So I've used that approach in a different manner with a lot of my PGA teaching pro clients. When it's time for them to go play and stop teaching or being the director of golf, I have them change their shirt and change their hat for a similar manner. But I love that microcosm on the range right there. I mean, I think that's so valuable. You get to step into the player version and then step back into the student, the trainee, whatever it may be. Phenomenal.
To me, Paul, you literally have to be in effect, metaphorically, 2 people to get the best out of your golf. You've got to be the engineer who goes into the garage, but then you need to be the driver that takes the car onto the Formula One track.
Love that. Love that. Now, do we talk about Team Red Bull on this podcast? I don't know where you stand. For somebody who uses a lot of Formula One metaphors, I've got no interest in Formula One. So that's funny. I like Verstappen, but I think I like him more for his attitude and his demeanor, his swag, if you will, which brings up a good transition to my next question. We talked about, metaphorically needing to be kind of 2 individuals, whether it's the engineer and the driver, alter egos, or stepping into this different identity. What's your experience either coaching through that or maybe just your perspective on the utility of that?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that being comes before doing. the person that you are on the golf course is going to influence everything. So, I'll work extensively with players and sort of say, let's be really clear on who you're going to be on the golf course today. I think a really good exercise I'll get players to do is to really write out in detail what I call the old story. Write out in detail the person that you've been on the golf course. What has been your golfing personality up to now? Warts and all. Don't hold anything back. Put it down on paper. And then we write the new story of, who do you want to be on the golf? Who do you want to be on the golf? Do you want to be an arsehole for the rest of your life and, be dreadful to play with and you're just miserable if you're a bad shot? Is that really what you want your future to be? And then once they've written that new story, then at least you can then start to work towards that and make a commitment. Making a commitment to who you're going to be on the golf course, I think, is one of the key things to make real progress with your game.
Incredible, because then you can break that down even further depending on the individual. What does this version of you believe about himself, others, exactly. Golf, the behaviors? Yeah, I love that. I'm such a fan.
How does this version of yourself react to setbacks? How does this person interact with others? How does this person deal with being under par? You just at the end of the day, Paul, with all this, and you swore once, it's giving me license to swear. We're fucking making all of this up anyway. At the end of the day, we're just hitting a piece of rubber around a field. What we make it out to be is up to us. So we're making it all up. Now, if we're making stuff up that isn't helping us, we might as well make up something else that serves us.
Yeah. The word "fuck" is always appreciated here.
Beautiful.
So I'm glad you tapped into that.
Yeah, it's a great and attentional focused word.
Well, good way to tie that back all together. That was well said.
There you go.
I want to get you out of here on this, Karl, because we're gonna do this again. This has been nothing short of phenomenal. But I want you to imagine there's a billboard placed centrally located on a golf course, so it's visible from all 18 tee boxes, and you have an opportunity to write a powerful message on that billboard for every golfer to see. What message do you write there?
I think, and this may sound a bit cliched, and we could spend a long time explaining it, but hopefully it'll resonate. It would be something just as simple as just be grateful for the opportunity to play today.
Tell me more.
In the sense that I think the greatest delusion that we have as human beings is that there's always going to be another round to play. There's always going to be another opportunity. Why are we so arrogant to think that the next round is anything other than the last opportunity that we get to play? Because unfortunately, every one of us is going to play our last round at some point. Yeah. And I think gratitude is such a powerful place to play the game from. I call it going first. You're not waiting for the golf ball to make you feel good. You're not waiting for results to make you feel good. You're actually, I think, for anybody who's able to play golf, you think about it the next time that you play. Think of all the things that have to be in your favour for you to even peg it up the next time and play. You've got to have the financial means that most of the world don't have. And believe me, I'm not a left-wing politician. You have to have the financial wherewithal to play. You have to be healthy enough to be able to play. All the work that's gone into the golf course. There's a lot of things got to conspire in your favour to even play the next round of golf. And we ignore that at our peril. And to actually acknowledge that and be genuinely grateful for the opportunity, that's a powerful place to begin any round of golf. And I think a lot of the identity stuff then can build off that just fundamentally, you're just glad of the opportunity to play. Because I know a bunch of people who can't play anymore, and they would give anything for another round. They would give anything for another opportunity.
Yeah, well said. I really like that message. I appreciate you sharing that. Where can our listeners go to not only learn from you, to work with you? I mean, you've got an incredible app that I'm going to let you share about. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a good protocol to begin with. Well, we've got something we're pretty proud of. We've worked on it for 5 years. It's called the Mind Caddie app, and there's a bunch of programs in there. Some of the things that we've talked about, very effective training games that you can work with on the range. But we've got a recent addition to it, which is a bit. I think it's the first at the moment. I'm sure it won't be the last by any means. But we've actually got the AI version of me, So basically, everything that I've ever done and said has been fed into this AI system, all the seminars, books, and everything. And you can basically have a conversation with this thing as though you're actually working with me one-to-one. And it asks you questions and things like that. So it's pretty cool piece of kit for, a year's subscription is less than your average price of a golf lesson. So that would be a good place. If you perhaps a coach is listening, the website is the mindfactor.com. But the app, I would say, have a look at that. You can do a free trial. It's called the Mind Caddie.
Now, who do I connect with to have AI Karl as a guest on the podcast?
Well, the worrying people, a few people who are close to me who've tested it out, said, unfortunately, the AI version is far better than the original. So, including my wife. My wife said the great thing about the AI version is it actually asks me some questions.
Karl, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Paul. Great questions.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode. I know you found just an incredible amount of value in all that Karl shared and discussed here. So make sure you, A, go back and listen to it again, and then B, share it with a fellow golfer so that the both of you can continue to get out of your own way and play better golf. And if you haven't done so already, it takes 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. It's always appreciated because it helps me have a bit more street cred to get wonderful guests like Karl onto the show. Thank you again for listening. Have a phenomenal rest of your day. Hit them straight this weekend, and we'll catch you in the next episode.